The Macchi C.202 Folgore was a World War II fighter aircraft built by Macchi Aeronautica and operated mainly by the Regia Aeronautica Air Force. Macchi aircraft designed by Mario Castoldi received the C letter in the model designation, hence the Folgore is referred to as the C.202 or MC.202. The C.202 was a development of the earlier C.200 Saetta, with an Italian-built version of the Daimler-Benz DB 601AA engine and a redesigned, more streamlined fuselage. Considered to be one of the best wartime fighters to serve in large numbers with the Regia Aeronautica, the Folgore operated on all fronts in which Italy was involved. The Folgore went into service with the Regia Aeronautica in July 1941 and immediately proved to be an effective and deadly dogfighter. The Australian ace Clive Caldwell, who fought a wide variety of German, Italian and Japanese fighters during 1941–45, later stated that the C.202 was one of the best and most undervalued of fighters. The C.202 also had its defects. Like its predecessor, the Macchi C.200, it could enter a dangerous spin. It was insufficiently armed, with just 2 machine guns that easily jammed. The radios were unreliable, forcing the pilots to communicate by waggling wings. The oxygen system was inefficient, causing up to 50–60% of the pilots to break off missions, sometimes even causing fatal accidents. Development. The decision of the Italian military authorities to adopt radial engines meant that, during the second half of the 1930s, the Italian aeronautical industry failed to develop more powerful engines based on streamlined liquid-cooled designs. This forced Macchi Aeronautica to rely on the aging Fiat A74 radial engine for its C.200 fighter. By 1941, the C.200, armed with 2 12.7mm machine guns and with a maximum speed of 504 km/h, was obsolete. In July 1939, the RA requested that Regia build a prototype RE-2000 with a German Daimler-Benz DB 601AA liquid-cooled supercharged inverted V12 engine rated at 1,175 PS. This became the RE-2001. At the time, the most powerful reliable Italian inline engine was the 715 kW Isotta Fraschini Associati C.200, which was designed in 1936. In November 1939, Alfa Romeo acquired the license to produce the DB 601AA as the Alfa Romeo RA-1000R C.41I Monzone, which was to be used in the production of C.202s. While they waited for Alfa Romeo production to start, Aeronautica Macchi imported a DB 601AA engine. Macchi chief of design Mario Castoldi began to work on mating the Macchi C.200 wings, undercarriage, vertical and horizontal tail units with a new fuselage incorporating the imported DB 601AA. Design of the new fighter began in January 1940 and, less than 7 months later, on the 10th of August 1940, the sole prototype MM-445 made its first flight 2 months after Italy's entry into World War II. For the first trials it was evident that the C.202 was an advanced design, mainly because of the use of the Daimler-Benz DB 601, a departure from the standard practice of using engines of Italian origin. Test results showed that Italy had caught up with Britain and Germany in the field of fighter airplanes. The prototype differed in some respects from the production aircraft. The headrest fairing incorporated 2 windows for rear visibility. while production versions replaced this with a narrower, scalloped headrest. The square-section supercharger air intake was replaced by an elongated round-sectioned fairing, which was later redesigned to incorporate a dust filter. The prototype was flown to the Regia Aeronautica's main test airfield at Guydonia, where it met with an enthusiastic response from test pilots. A speed of 603 km per hour was recorded, with 5,486 meters being reached in 6 minutes, and little of the good maneuverability of the C.200 was lost. Another of its attributes was its extremely strong construction that allowed its pilots to dive the aircraft steeply. Due to the flight test reports, the C.202 was immediately ordered into production, with the first examples appearing in May 1941. The complexity of the structure was not well suited to mass production, and resulted in a limited production rate compared to the Bf-109EF, while the Macchi needed 22,000 or more. The growth of the C.202 project was slower than that of the RE 2001, but by employing both mass production techniques and less expensive advanced technologies, the production cost was slightly less than that of the Regia and RE 2001. This latter, the only other DB-601 fighter in mass production, was slower and heavier but had a bigger wing and a more advanced and adaptable structure. Breeder Milan was also chosen to build the C.202 and eventually built the majority of the type. Ambrosini was another subcontractor, building some 100 C.202s. Design Castoldi, whose background included working on Schneider Trophy Racers design, followed Celestino Rosatelli as the main designer of new fighters for the RA. His new project was robust and small, utilizing a conventional but complex structural arrangement based on his experience with wooden designs, and at the same time paying great attention to its aerodynamics. The wing and fuselage structures were of a conventional metal design, having a single vertical tail with 2 elevators, and a wing of relatively conventional design with 2 main spars and 23 ribs. The ailerons, elevators and rudder were metal structures with fabric covering. Apart from the ailerons, the entire trailing edge of the wing was dominated by a pair of all-metal split flaps. The undercarriage was of a standard design, the 2 widely set hydraulically operated main gears retracting inwardly into the wing, while the tail wheel was non-retractable. As with the C.200, to counteract the torque of the engine, Castoldi extended the left wing by 21 centimeters. This meant that the left wing developed more lift, offsetting the tendency of the aircraft to roll to the left due to the rotation of the propeller. The empty weight of the new C.202 gradually increased throughout production, and due to the thickness of metal used, it was also comparatively heavy. Yet this class of aircraft was still considered lightweight compared to other contemporary fighter designs. The Macchi's mass was around 300 kilograms higher than the comparable Bf-109E German fighter. Consequently, the power-to-weight ratio was considerably lower while wing loading was higher. Australian Air Ace Clive Caldwell felt the Folgore would have been superior to the Messerschmitt Bf-109 had it been better armed. The C.202 was lightly armed by the standards of the time, carrying the same armament as the CR-32 in 1933 design. The C.202 carried a standard 12.7 mm Breeder SAF-80 machine guns. The Breeder design was as heavy as the Browning M2, the model from which it was derived. The Breeder fired 12.7 by 81 mm Vickers ammunition, not 12.7 by 99 mm, with the result that the energy at the muzzle was 10,000 joules versus 16,000. The rate of fire was about 18 rounds per second or 0.63 kilograms. Initially, all the armament was fitted within the nose of the Macchi. Ammunition carried was up to 800 rounds. An additional pair of breeder 7.7mm machine guns was fitted in the wings in the 7 series onward, but these, along with 1,000 rounds of ammunition, added 100 kilograms to the aircraft's weight and were typically removed by pilots to save weight, since they were relatively ineffective against most enemy aircraft in 1942. A synchronizing unit allowed the nose guns to fire through the propeller disc, but with a 25% loss in ROF. A San Giorgio reflector gun sight was fitted. The fuselage housed the main armament and the Alfa Romeo RA 1000R C419 monzone engine, which drove a Piaggio P10013 blade, variable pitch, constant speed propeller. Situated behind the engine and under the 12.7mm ammunition boxes, there was a 270L self-sealing fuel tank. Another 80L fuel tank was placed behind the pilot, with 2 additional tanks, each with a capacity of 40L, being housed in the wing roots. The total fuel capacity was 430L. The main coolant radiator was housed in a rectangular fairing under the fuselage beneath the cockpit, and the oil cooler was placed under the nose within a streamlined, rectangular housing. For the cockpit aft, the fuselage was formed into a round monocoque structure. The aft fuselage tapered into the tail and contained the radio, oxygen and flight control mechanisms. The canopy was hinged on the starboard base and open sideways. Behind the canopy, the pilot's headrest was fixed to a triangular turnover pylon which was covered by a streamlined, tapered fairing. This fairing was shaped into an inverted T, which enabled the pilot to have a reasonable field of view to the rear. The unpressurized cockpit had an armor plate fitted behind the armored seat for protection. While early C.202s had a very short, stub radio mast projecting from the fairing, most used a tall, slim mast. On the 21st of August 1941, Tenente Giulio Reiner, one of the most skillful and experienced pilots of 9 Degrees Group O, flew the military control flight in Lonate Pozzallo. The Ufficio Tecnico recorded the maximum speed of 1,078.27 km per hour in the Folgore in a vertical dive, with 5.8 g forces while pulling out of the dive. Engineer Mario Castoldi, the designer of the 202, questioned whether Reiner had properly flown the test. In fact, during the vertical dive, Reiner had to face very strong vibrations throughout the airframe and in the control stick, while the flying controls were locked and the propeller blades were jammed at maximum pitch. The clean aerodynamics offered by the inline engine permitted dive speeds high enough for pilots to encounter the then unknown phenomenon of compressibility. Some defects of the new fighter could be easily fixed, such as the landing gear lowering inadvertently when pulling out of a steep dive, the machine gun bonnet that broke, the ammunition belts that jammed, and the air cleaner intake that, because of the engine vibrations, first crystallized and then sheared itself. Other defects, like the unreliability of the radios and of the oxygen systems, and the limited armament, could not